Recording.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Yeah. So if you don't mind, please turn off the microphone. So there is, while Vicente or somebody else is speaking, and then, raise your hand or write in the chat. So in case you want to, So, well, I'm so happy and pleased to present Vicente Palomera. Welcome to our activity in Initiative Toronto. Vicente, he's a colleague, an amazing, he's the plus one of an amazing cartel that we are doing here in the group.
Inés, no, you are the plus one.
Yeah, plus, yeah, okay. Because at the beginning we invited you as a plus one. That's why I have this lapsus, no? I am the plus one, yes.
Forget that.
You name me the plus one. Yeah. Well, I'm not doing so well, maybe my function as a plus one. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, so we are so happy. Vicente is a member of, is a psychoanalyst, member of the World Association of Psychoanalysis, of the Lacanian School of Psychoanalysis in Spain, is also member of the EOL, that is the School of Lacanian in Argentina, orientation in Argentina. He's an honorary member of the Lacanian Compass, a great collaborator. And also he has a PhD from Paris 8 University and Department of Psychoanalysis. And he well, many other things, but he participated in the foundation of the European School of Psychoanalysis. So he will explain a little bit. We wanted to because this is toward our Congress, the NLS Congress, that it will be in July. So the function of the written has been a question that is part of the argument of for the Congress. So Vicente, welcome, and well, please, the floor is yours. That was the phrase that I was looking. Yeah.
The floor is mine and the screen too.
Okay, yeah, the screen is yours. Yeah, that's good. Now we have to say that. Okay.
Well, first of all, dear colleagues, and I want to thank you for your presence in this encounter. As Inés has already said, that this cartel, we work in a cartel since perhaps 1.5 years already, and on the question of the formation of the analyst. And it happens that I sent to my friends in the cartel a text that I prepared to give when I gave a seminar in the London Society, a seminar devoted to the question, to the seminar 20, Encore, and the English colleagues invited me to talk about the third chapter of Encore, which is entitled "The Function of the Written." So I sent my contribution to the cartel, and Inés thought that it would be a good idea to present the question I presented in this seminar in London on the function of the written. This is the title of this third chapter of Seminar 20, and it is the name that Jacques-Alain Miller put to name this the question tackled by Lacan in this session of his seminar. Although it is very interesting, the question that is developed in this chapter, I thought it would be a good idea that not to go through this chapter entirely, but to present it in a more articulated way with the clinics. And although, as I do not know the audience, the Canadian of Toronto's colleagues that invited me, except Inés and Scott Ryan, no, I do not know what is your, we could say, level of knowledge of Lacan's teaching, although I suppose that most of you are advanced in the reading of Lacan's teaching. I have chosen this way of presenting this conference. Well, I would say that I'll take this conference not as a conference but a workshop where we can share at the end a conversation about the question of what does the function of the written means. So first point, just remember that Jacques Lacan wrote in the 50s an écrit, a writing called The Agency of the Letter. Lacan discovered already in this at that moment that the written, the place of the written in the very act of speaking. So the fact that when we speak, we also write. This text, this agency of the letter, leads to what is heard as being grasped, or better, as being structured according to the linguistic approach. The linguistic approach, what is that? The linguistic approach, which is essential in Lacan's teaching from the beginning to the end, the linguistic approach aims at a system, let's say an articulated knowledge present in what is heard when one speaks, meaning that it is an articulated knowledge in which the phonemes, phonemas, phonemes, according to linguistics, according to Jacobson and Saussure, the phonemes are opposed to one another. And Lacan in this text, in this decree, treats the system of phonemes like a system of letters. That's why he calls the title of this decree is The Agency of the Letter. What Lacan calls the letter is the signifier as detached from any value of signification. That is to say, as localized in the, let's say, materiality that is presented to us in the type character, like the letters in the printing. If the letter is the signifier as such, which is to say, in its separation from the signified, writing is at this level, at this very level. The second part, if you go to this text, you go to the second part of the agency of the letter, you see that it is entitled The Letter in the Unconscious. The second part, this second part is the letter in the unconscious, and demonstrating the unconscious structured like a language. The question is, on what basis does Lacan say this? In demonstrating exactly that when it concerns the unconscious, we are dealing with writing. Lacan demonstrated that we are dealing with writing by using a dream, in showing that the dream image is retained by Freud for its value as signifier. And this is what Lacan distinguished in what Freud offers an example when he says the dream is to be read like a riddle. To say that a dream is read like a riddle is to say that the image doesn't count as a figure, a figured sign, nor as a pantomime either, but as a letter. In the second chapter, let's take an example. You know very well what Freud presents at the beginning of the Traumdeutung, the interpretation of dreams. In the second chapter of the Traumdeutung, dealing with the method of interpretation of dreams, remember that Freud gives us the finest example of a dream interpretation which has come down to us from antiquity. It is based on a play upon words. Freud refers to Artemidoros. Artemidoros relates the following, I quote, "But it seems to me that Aristandros gave a most happy interpretation to Alexander of Macedon, Alexander the Great, when the latter held Tyros, encompassed in a state of siege, and was angry and depressed over the great waste of time. He dreamed that he saw a satyr dancing on his shield." You remember this example. It happened that Aristandros was in the neighborhood of Tyros and in the escort of the king, who was waging war on the Syrians, by dividing the word satyros into sa and tyros. He induced the king to become more aggressive in the siege, and thus Alexander became master of the city. Remember that he literally read satyros, thine is Tyros. Freud concludes, I quote, that the dream indeed is so intimately connected with verbal expressions that every tongue has its own dream language. In this sense, meaning that a dream is, as a rule, not to be translated into other languages. So, an analysis, no matter what you say, it's a question, a fundamental rule in analysis, say no matter what, but say. This is the fundamental rule. You incite the subject, we call the analysand, we incite the subject to say. It is the reading of the saying that defines the unconscious. The unconscious is what is read. The question in analysis is then to learn to read what is written. We could say that it is to learn to read the disc, the record that turns around with a variable periodicity. Well, in fact, Freud's discovery was that every human being is occupied by a disc. It can be an obsession, it can be a thought, etc. He discovered the occupation of that insistence that does not know time. And we learn from the analytic experience that an analysis is built on a series of formulations and reformulations of the same thing. And that thus, it's no strange that Lacan presented the end of analysis with what he called le bien dire, rendered into English like in le bien dire, so the well said. I don't know whether it is a good translation, the well said or saying it well, which implies that what you are looking for in analysis is to learn to say the same thing better and better until you are satisfied with it. In fact, what we call free association is no different from say it again. Every session is a say it again. It's something akin to Samuel Beckett's saying. You remember that famous sentence, ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail again, but fail better. So the function of repetition is always present in this say it again. Don't be afraid to repeat yourself. trying to say it better. By stressing this say it better, we seem to be indicating that the unconscious is something written. So the point in analysis being to read what is written better and better. If you consider this saying it better and better, which we demand on the patient, we could place writing under a bar and reading above it. I don't have the blackboard, but you could write it, reading above and under the bar, writing. You speak in analysis, and it is as if you were reading a text better and better. This would make of the unconscious a text, and an analysis would not be a matter of what you mean, but on the contrary, in an analysis, we grant a great deal of importance to slips of the tongue. That is to say, a slip of the tongue is precisely a moment when it is not what you mean to say, but what you don't mean to say, that it triumphs, as if the text were forcing itself to your speech and making you equivocate. Second point, equivocation. It is also important in the act of interpretation, making the patient hear what she or he has said by making him or her to repeat it. We cut the session or shorten it at some point to make the patient hear what he or she has just said, in spite of what he or she meant to say, to make the patient measure the distance between what she or he meant and what he or she in fact has said. Well, when we do this, we are trying to show that something that she said or he said may be heard in another way. That is, we are making he or her read something else in his or her speech. And that frequently involves always a reference to the written word, in which different meanings may be attributed to the same letters and groupings thereof. This is only understandable by a constant reference of the spoken word to the written word. We can also say this in a third way. It's a third point too. When you read a text, you are in the realm of meaning, and the text as such is like a writing. Writing which is difficult to read, a transcription of a text which is legible only in parts. This schema opposes meaning and nonsense. I don't know whether it is good, I have written this, but perhaps it is not, it is what in French we say hors sens, outside meaning and outside meaning. And we could say that in reading a text, you give it a meaning, but there are parts of it that you cannot read, parts which remain nonsensical. Sometimes this nonsense manages to show through. This is the perspective Lacan presents in 1976 in what we call the last teaching, his last teaching. There, he presents this in the preface of the English edition of Seminar 11. He presents the unconscious saying, I quote, "When the space of a lapsus no longer has any range of meaning, only is one sure that one is in the unconscious. one knows that one is in the unconscious. It is also from this perspective that Lacan says in this very preface of the English edition, he says, there is no truth, I quote, there is no truth that in passing through awareness, does not lie, as if what counts as truth at this level, under the bar, as I put it before, can only appear as a lie in the upper part of the schema. This throws into question what we call discovery in psychoanalysis. Lacan's conclusion, which appears in this preface, is that the unconscious is real. Lacan tried up till the end to hone in on, to polish, to say it better, this strange property of the unconscious. 4. Lacan's return to Freud is highlighted in the Rome discourse, as highlighted in the Rome discourse, the function and field of language and speech and language, 1953. Lacan makes explicit what is already present in Freud. You know, the unconscious is structured as a language. I don't know whether it is the unconscious is structured like a language or as a language, but I leave it to you. The unconscious thought process, the unconscious thought process comes down to linguistic mechanisms that are governed by inherent rules or laws, as Lacan calls them. He stressed the fact that we should not be seduced by the meanings of words. Quite the contrary, as we have already said before, in the material aspect of the signifier that appears prominently in this linguistic determination. It is precisely this aspect that explains why free association is not free at all, and how symptoms are determined. Let me give you an example, coming from a clinical vignette presented by Freud in a letter dated the 29th of December, 1897. You'll find it in the Freud's Flies Briefe, in the letters that Freud and his friend Flies exchanged. In a letter to Flies dated on the 29th of December, as I said, 1897, the patient, he is talking about a patient. In fact, into brackets, I put it into brackets. I must say that we all know that the most important clinical case in this correspondence, in these letters from Freud to Flies, there is this clinical case of Irma, the famous patient, where Freud discovers the access to the interpretation of a dream, the injection, no, the Irma's injection. But the second most important case in this correspondence, these letters, is patient called patient Mr. Herr E. Mr. E, a young man whose main problem is what is called in German is Unschlüssigkeit. Unschlüssigkeit is meaning that it was a man that was unable to make up his mind. This was his most important symptom. Well, the worst symptom of an obsessional, doubting. Well, this expression, I want to say that this expression is a very nice expression, English expression, to make up one's mind is really wonderful if you think about it, because it is the first thing that every one of us has to do every day when we wake up. We have to make up our mind. That is to say, we have to remember who we are, where we are, what is expected from us, etc. So sometimes this making up our mind is less evident. For Mr. E, this was a continuous problem. One day, during a session, it's an analysis that took place during 1.5 years, more or less, for what I have been following the letters. It was this, in a session, a very important session, he tells Freud about a scene going back to the age of 10. He was pursuing a beetle, trying to catch a beetle. And at that moment, he experienced a panic attack. It was not the first time that this memory popped up during his analysis. But this particular session, he adds that it must have been a ladybird, not a beetle, but especially a ladybird, what we call in Spanish, una mariquita, ladybird, and started to laugh when he said this. It is more to it, he says. The next session brings a surprising analysis. Beetle in German is, I cannot write it, but Käfer, K-A-F-E-R, Käfer. A ladybird is a Marienkäfer in German, Marienkäfer, which includes the name Marie, Marienkäfer. The patient was raised, as we know, in the Viennese bourgeoisie, meaning that he had a French nanny and that his parents from time to time spoke French. The memory about the beetle proves to be a screen memory because it evokes the French Käfer, which sounds exactly the same as the German word Käfer, beetle, Marienkäfer. Käfer means, what do I have to do in French? And was the expression used by his mother, the patient's mother, when she was dating the man who became later the father of the patient. The patient has learned about this expression when he overheard a conversation between his grandmother, the mother of this mother, and his aunt. Que faire? Will I marry this man or not? The determination via the signifier becomes even more obvious. If we add Marienkäfer, which is in French means se marier to spouse, se marier. Marienkäfer in French means to get married. Käfer in German is also a slightly derogatory expression for a woman. And on top of all this, the first name of the patient's mother was Marie. Well, as you see, this is only one of the many examples that we can find in Freud, illustrating Lacan's thesis about the unconscious being structured as a language, or like a language. There is a determinative line running from the obviously Oedipal symptom, Unschlüssigkeit, to the mother's doubts whether she would marry this particular man, the father of the patient, or not. Lacan often refers to Freud's formulation. Another case on the fetish, in the case of a man who, in order to become interested in a woman, had to detect a certain shine on the nose. In German, Glanz auf der Nase. Freud traced it back to the fact that the patient had an English nurse. Out of sexual curiosity, he tried to glance at her, but she told him that somehow his nose would be punished if he tried to look at her when he was not allowed to. Hence, glance, in German, glance, which is shine, and glance in English, to look at, no, were linked to the nose. In this way, you see, one can make sense of something that made no sense at all. That is just the way it is. One cannot explain why all of this men's sexual life was devoted to the transliteration of English into German, as the previous patient we mentioned, the transliteration of French into German. It has a nonsensical side, and that is exactly what Lacan tries to isolate when he stresses the master signifier, Glanz in German, shine in this case. Only afterwards does he discuss all the explanations. Whatever makes sense can be interpreted. In an analysis, you have to do the same work that was done by Freud. You try to trace things back and elicit the memories that were linked to the original sexual aspects of the patient's life. And in a deeper sense, at the end, you've got the kernel, the kernel, which has been isolated as nonsensical. In this case, it was precisely in this glance that Freud detects that the boy was at the origin of his like. He was a gaze. He himself was a gaze, this object, what we call object A, and was structured, and what structured his relationship with the other was the fact that he identified with the gaze. That is, a partial drive. His jouissance was once and for all fixated. There's a fixation within that gaze. It was a necessary condition for him to attain an erection. Glance auf der Nase was a fetish, and it was defined in part by a partial drive, glance auf der Nase, object A, and also something that conditioned phallic jouissance for this subject. Materialité, 5.5. In 1975, in a conference on the symptom, Lacan isolated the word matter as he said it in French. The materialité. There is an equivocity, materialité and materialité. I don't know whether you grasp it in English, but in French, it sounds the same, materialité, which materia, and materialité means the word. Once he isolates the effect of anxiety, and more generally the symptoms produced by the use of natural language, this gives us the idea of what signification is. If now we consider another case that I'm going to take from a testimony of an analyst of the school, we'll see that it is useful because there is a noise. Don't you? Someone has the microphone open.
Yeah, I just turn it off. Yeah.
So may I go on?
Yes, yes.
Shall I go on? Yeah. So I now want to consider following these cases. I think that it would be useful because you have in this case, I'm going to tackle now the wandering, his condensation of his wandering through all the chains of signifiers into two moments. A first interpretation in the case and a final interpretation. It is an analyst who condenses his analytical experience in the following way. He explains that he started with a first interpretation from the first analyst. He had three analysts who makes a reproach. The analyst asks him at the end of a session, "What is that little scar on your cheek? You ought to have spoken to me about that." And the analyst says, well, the analyst explains that after this intervention of the analyst, he had a dream. I'm going to read the dream, and you will see what we call materiality. I am wandering about in the corridor of the Holy Family Clinic, the hospital where my mother gave birth to all her children. The corridor is L-shaped with black and white checkered tiles that are corning loose. I am careful not to walk on the joints. All of a sudden, I feel the pressing need to urinate. The toilets are at the corner of the L. You see that's in this letter L. It's very important. And I go in and start to urinate in the lavatory bowl without being able to stop. The bowl overflows, and I wake up urinating in the bed. It's amazing, an amazing dream, of course. It's a strong dream. We could say that it is a dream that what we usually call in psychoanalysis a regression. He pisses like a child and goes through the moment of his birth on the imaginary level. The analyst shows that in this dream, his whole story is concentrated. So you see that this dream is, we can take the analysis of this dream as the analysis of, it could be the interpretation of this dream is, we could take it as the interpretation of all the analysis, all the symptom. So this analysis shows us that this dream is where the story is concentrated. Both the signifiers he received through the generations of the family and the effects of the jouissance that these signifiers had on him. The main signifier transmitted through the generations of this family, of his family, was a sentence from an uncle who, dying in the First World War, wrote to his brother saying, literally, "Everything's going badly here. I don't know if I'll get out alive. Should I die? Occupe-toi d'elle." That is to say, take care of her. In French, occupe-toi d'elle. He was referring to his loved one. The brother marries the loved one, and these are the parents of the patient, of the analyst. So you here have the sentence, occupe-toi d'elle, take care of her, which is reduced as the L in the dream. Occupe-toi elle. It is this signifier that runs through the family as a kind of superegoic command, but does not have a precise meaning. It is, as you could say, meaningless. The word effect of the transmission of desire in the brothers, desire and the command, produced the effect that the child produced by this command, running through the generations, had a lot of difficulty identifying himself as a boy, because the most important thing in the family was elle, she, occupe-toi, take care of her. The important was her, not him. You see, no? He was struck, we could say that this man was struck with the occupe-toi d'elle, that function as a command, not only for the father, but also for his mother too, who had great difficulty taking care of him and not of her. So we could say that the whole family was devoted to take care of her. And as the analyst has transmitted in his presentation as in the past, he was accepted and loved as a child, but as her, as a she, and not as a he. And so the problem of the toilets at the corner of the L in the dream is, of course, crucial. We have this resignification of him as a boy that will run through his entire analysis until its end. At the end of the analysis, you have one interpretation that opens a new field. He was developing the imaginary contradiction he had between his identification as a boy and being raised as a girl within the desire of the family, until his analyst says to him, this is an interpretation, you love your fantasies too much. The effect produced was that he did not have any fantasies anymore. He was void. He testified to the fact that for 2 years, he did not have any more fantasies, but he had anxiety. But only in going to his sessions, it did not invade his whole life. It was concentrated on the analytic experience. It lasted quite a while through. 2 years throughout which he was confronted with this anxiety and the void that produced the fact that his fantasies were not allowed anymore. The fact that the jouissance he had from them was not admitted. At least that is what he thought, being himself the production of a command. He received the interpretation as a command. Well, the whole story of the patient, of this analyst as a patient, is that he was under the command to occupe-toi d'elle, take care of her. So now this is a command. He took this, you love your fantasies too much, as also as a command. So the jouissance that he obtained from these fantasies in analysis, he felt them as not admitted. At least that is what he thought, being himself the production of a command. And he received this interpretation as a command of the same impact as the command that presided over his birth had on his previous fantasies. And then through this wandering through the desert, he wanted to go forward for the past. For the procedure, he wanted to demand the procedure of the past. And the analyst said, not yet. Then a second moment occurs, and he dreams that. He is in the waiting room waiting his turn. There is bustling in the corridor, hurly-burly, different from usual. Something important is going on. The analyst does not understand. He wants to understand and goes to find out. He learns that it is a day of mourning. The analyst has lost a close one. They are going to do an autopsy, which explains the bustle. There is an autopsy table and some instruments. The cranium is open. Someone takes out a gelatinous mass and lays it down roughly on a chair. The analyst moves closer and perceives a lump of head pâté. The funeral attendants take the body away. What this analyst stresses is that for him, the dream of the death of a close one and the autopsy of the corpse is to go beyond the death of the command incarnated in his father. He makes a pun on the fact that pâté is pater, father, pater without the R. The bereavement he's going through is the moment he can go beyond what had been sustaining his world until that moment. So he dreams that he wakes up and his analyst is there on the couch he is lying on. And he says to him, it's over. He presents himself for the past after this distinct moment, saying that for him, it was over. After that moment when there was something that goes beyond the moment of anxiety, the bereavement for the father and the encounter with the mass of jelly he had in his brain, his fantasies he loved so much, which are just put there on the chair. So you can see the opposition between the object A that was imaginarized at the beginning of the treatment as a formless liquid inside his body, but coming out like a fluid that could not find its form, its shape. And at the end, the mass of jelly that was inside the cranium, which has at last found its form. And he can leave it in the analyst's consulting room and go beyond. So you have here two things in this sequence of events. One is the crossing of the point of the subject supposed to know, that is, the stories that his unconscious told him, the chains of signifiers that were supposed to know his jouissance, and the guarantee they found in the command that, starting from the previous generation, had been the guideline of his parents' life and his own. He was able to go through this moment and wake up on new ground. And the other is that he could also give a shape to the object A. So you have at once the crossing of the subject supposed to know on one side, and the encounter with the object A. I would like to say that in this kind of a position in which there are the histories that one is made up of, this analyst testifies to the fact that at one moment they can be left behind on the condition that one find the contingency of both his encounter with jouissance and the contingency of this absolute command that functioned as a master signifier, as a trump card in his life, as the king that ordered all the cards he had been dealt, including his difficulties with sexuation. So this is an example of what is actually what Lacan calls taking the materiality of la langue. When I presented this comment on chapter 3 in London, in the seminar of the London Society, I gave another vignette taken from the testimony of a colleague that was in analysis with Lacan just after this seminar 20. That is to say, more or less, in 1974, 75. This testimony was published in Spanish in a book called 3 Segundos con Lacan, 3 Seconds with Lacan. And it is the testimony of the analyst, a Parisian analyst from Argentina, named Stella Solano. Most of you maybe know her. She says in this analysis that she told Lacan, I dreamt of a woman who came to Paris. Well, you have to take it in French. J'ai eu un rêve d'une femme qui venait à Paris. This is the sentence. This is the dream. I dreamt of a woman who came to Paris, qui venait à Paris. To which Lacan immediately responds, that's right. While getting up from his analyst chair and with a determined gesture. He opens the door and I leave his office. Once again, I have not been able, says Stella, once again, I have not been able to relate the entire text of my dream. But the story of my dream implied a continuation. However, once again, due to the sharp cut practiced by the analyst, my dream was cut off from its plot, its staging, its displacements, its condensation, something that would have taken Freud a long time in order to analyze the dream with the patients. That's the way Freud worked. Perhaps next in the conversation, we can talk about this variation with this idea that we can grasp in the reading of this vignette. So Stella says, once again, I have not been able to relate the entire text of my dream. This dream implied a continuation, blah, blah, blah. The analyst cuts the practice of Lacan. And once again, says Stella, I had only a bit of a sentence between my lips. J'ai un rêve d'une femme qui venait à Paris. I dreamt of a woman who came to Paris. So she only had this bit of a sentence between her lips and the session was over. Her dream was actually reduced to an interrupted sentence, nothing more. If I had been able, says she, if I had been able to go to the end of the story of my dream, I would have exposed a series of adventures lived in Paris by the aforementioned woman, surely staging something on the order of her entanglement. But no, none of that. It was exasperating. How long had that session lasted? Not 3 seconds. The time to say one. As Stella crosses the courtyard to the exit of the building, as bewildered as ever, she suddenly heard what she had said differently. This is what is reading now. what means the question of reading. She suddenly heard what she had said differently. A woman who loves, who wants, a woman, une femme qui veut, who wants, is born in Paris. Une femme qui venait à Paris, who wants, who loves, a woman who loves, is born in Paris. Eureka! She laughed out loud. A new dimension opened up in her. From that day on, she was able to read the symptom by the ears, since they were no longer plucked, closed by the roundness of the meaning, always in solidarity with the good form, good shape. The plaque of meaning suddenly peeled off like a shell, releasing la langue from the envelope of language. The transience of the session, 3 seconds, as she calls it, and this is how we called, we put the title of the book is 3 seconds with Lacan. The transience of the session implied its reduction to the espace d'elapse, space of elapse, to the space of elapse, and its sharp surgical cutting operation, making a hole in the statements, allowed her to finally shift the passage of the word towards the writing. So playing with the equivocation, would say the analyst, Lacan in this example, made something else resonate than what had been said with the intention of saying. This implies a different way of writing what is heard and transforms the analytical operation into a reading exercise, giving the sentences the consistency of the materiality, the materiality of the word. No? That is the thread and the string on which one works to isolate the one, the signifier one, all alone, without any burden of meaning. It is at this price that you have a chance to touch the real thing. So, just like to try to reduce something and go to the end of my intervention, my speech. What Lacan stressed at the end of his teaching was the two different jouissances. What he called the jouissance of language, which is the jouissance of meaning. It's endless, no? The flight of meaning also. The jouissance of the phallic jouissance, and la langue. La langue is written with a whole word written together. La langue. I don't know how to render it in English, but we can. As it is, in fact, it is a neologism. But maybe we can talk about this neologism from Lacan later. In the analytic experience, we operate from meaning. How can we solve the part of jouissance that escapes meaning? This is a point. How then to deal with the semblance which responds to the register of the imaginary and the symbolic, the out of meaning, what is where we locate the real jouissance. The disjunction of the semblance and the real that allows Lacan to distinguish jouissances in plural, that which condenses in the object plus of jouissance, object little a, that which relates to the jouissance of speech, both distinct from the irreducible, even real jouissance, which in the last term unseals the symptom. It is this distinction that leads Lacan to consider the object little a as an elaborable nucleus of jouissance, as pertaining to semblance, as well as phallic jouissance, which results from what is inscribed from the sexual term in terms of the signifier. So it is the differential status of jouissances that gives reasons for the distinction made by Lacan between la langue and language. What is la langue? La langue is the register. The register of la langue is that of the sounds of the signifier before any grammatical and syntactic ordering, like Käfer, no, like glance auf der Nase, like occupe-toi d'elle. You see this. It is the register of the signifier before any syntaxis or grammatical ordering is introduced, and which is why it is open to homophonic ambiguities. We could say that it is open to oral monsters. No, the signifier that comes to us before reading, before going to school. When as a child, we grasp language with its equivocities, with its ambiguities. When one doesn't yet know how to read, and language is open to mishearing. I'll take an example from an analysant who talked to me about the name Berazategui. Berazategui. It's a name. It's a Spanish name, a Basque name. And it is also the name of a town near Buenos Aires. 3 years ago, I was going from Buenos Aires to the University of La Plata, southwards from Buenos Aires. And you've got to go through the highway, through the town of Quilmes. Then comes the town called Hudson and Berazategui, and finally you reach La Plata. Well, when I was going through the highway and I passed through Berazategui, I recalled what this analysant said in a session. She was a child, when she was a child of 3.5, she did poo in the potty, and her mother threw the poop the poop in the potty. Bewildered, she asked her mother, "Where does it go?" The mother said, "It goes to Berazategui," meaning the channel of Berazategui, the village which has a Spanish name. But what she caught, this is a mishearing, no? What she caught was that the poop went to see someone called Zategui. A ver, to see Zategui. A ver a Zategui, to see someone called Zategui. Well, what Lacan calls la langue is Berazategui. La langue is what one makes of language through writing. While language will be defined by Lacan as being a lucubration of knowledge about la langue, which supposes a structural ordering of the signifiers of la langue based on the signifying pair S1, S2, responsible for the effects of meaning. Well, Lacan's hypothesis at the end, the last teaching, is that from the encounter of the body and la langue come the mark whose effects are the effects to be understood as the effects of jouissance. If the signifier pair S1, S2 is as specific to the articulation of language. And if this is responsible for the effects of meaning, then the signifiers of la langue, on the other hand, do not relate to the other of meaning, but to the one all alone, and their trace in the body takes on the status of a letter of jouissance. So, as you see, if speech and its lapsus lead back to the effects of meaning, Lacan is led to promote writing and thereby give a new definition of the unconscious. Lacan proposes a solution which first involves taking into account the distinction made by linguistics between the register of the signifier and that of the signified. From there, Lacan radically disjoins the signifier and the signified, since he introduces the notion of a non-relation between the two. This is what Lacan says. I quote, page 29, seminar 20, page 29. Distinguishing the dimension of the signifier only takes on importance when it is posited that what you hear in the auditory sense of the term bears no relation whatsoever to what it signifies. Thus, the signified that does not relate to what is heard becomes a consequence of the reading of what is meant as a signifier. If the signified depends on the reading we do of what is heard as a signifier, then the signifier effect as a reading effect takes us from speech to writing. This is why Lacan says, what is at stake in analytic discourse is always the following. You give a different reading to the signifiers that are enunciated. That's what they signify. You give a different reading, I insist, to the signifiers that are enunciated, ce qui s'énonce des signifiants, the signifiers that are enunciated. So you give a different reading to the signifiers that are enunciated than what they signify. If analytic discourse shifts speech to the written side, it is only to the extent that interpretation involves, I quote, it is quite clear, says Lacan, page 26, it is quite clear that in analytic discourse, what is involved is but that which is read beyond what you have incited the subject to say. And he insists, the letter is something that is read. The letter is the signifier alone, separated from the other signifiers. The letter is a signifier separated from the signified, separated from the effects of meaning. It takes the status of letter. The analytical interpretation, aiming at the real, must be conceived as an operation of reading. And in this sense, Lacan argues that when it comes to the real, it is about something that is written. That is a question of reading by deciphering it. I stop here, point, and I speak out now. Let's perhaps take some time to talk about all this, just to get back to return what you have heard, what you have read from what you have heard in this allocution.
Thank you, Vicente. Amazing. Yeah, so let's open to the floor who has questions or comments.
I hope this was not too harsh. I try to put some examples in order to help you to grasp the idea of what we do is writing. Okay. That what is we should at the end of Lacan's teaching, he doesn't speak of subject supposed knowledge, but subject supposed to read.
Yeah. I have a question. When you gave the phrase that Lacan says that we can be sure that we are in the unconscious when the lapsus has no meaning, no? So I said, wow. So the unconscious only have, for instance, if they have signifiers, I always imagine the unconscious like with S1, no? S1, S1s, a lot of signifiers, no? With no meaning, no? But then I thought, okay, where is the meaning located, no? Because jouissance, and then after you said that jouissance have two types of jouissance, so because I was saying, so jouissance, when we say that it's the meaning, where is located is if it's not in the unconscious, no? So because he said you can be sure that you are in the unconscious when there is no meaning, no? There are, so when, for instance, in a lapsus, in a space of lapsus that has no meaning, and also la lang, for instance, no, there is no meaning. But then I said, if they or maybe in the unconscious also there is, for instance, the phallus, you know, this jouissance that has meaning, no? Because we go through the chain of signifiers, no, looking for meaning or trying to understand, but then the cuts help us to reduce, no, to say it better. So my question, you know, like was that maybe because also the unconscious, I remember that I think that Palomera in one of, I don't know if the webinar that he gives in Caracas or something that we have, then the unconscious also the symbolic, the imaginary, and the real, no? So when we are the unconscious, the real, we only are in this part that is no meaning, no? But also the unconscious has this part that also has meaning, no? The phallic, maybe, I don't know. But that was my question, no? That maybe this thing about,
well, yes.
Sorry.
Let's start with this. It's a very good question. We are used to but all this depends on the idea you have of the unconscious. Mm-hmm. How do you define the unconscious? And even I would say that it is the idea that you have the unconscious, that you have a certain practice. So you practice analysis depending on the idea you have of the unconscious. Mm-hmm. If you go to Freud, go back to Freud, you remember he tried to give us an idea of the functioning of the psychic apparatus in layers, as different layers: the unconscious, preconscious, and the conscious. So it's like an archaeology. Well, he was very interested in archaeology. So there are layers, and you go from the surface to the deepest layer. So you go from up to down. This is it implies a certain idea of a topographical. Well, in fact, Freud spoke about topography. No, if you go on and place yourself in England in the 40s and the 50s, you have the Kleinians, and they have another idea of the unconscious. There's something that has to do with the out and in, not layers. So you projection, introjection. So the idea is that there is a movement that goes in like a sphere. There is outside and inside, not up and down. And you go to Lacan, introduces a new idea. He was interested in logics from the beginning, he was very interested in the question of logic, because the question of analysis is the question of what is the difference between meaning and what is outside meaning. As you put it. If you go to Lacan, if you read Lacan, you have an idea of the Möbius strip. You see the Möbius strip is not upside and down, upside down, or outside, inside, but it is a surface where you go in this strip, walking. If you go walking on this strip, on the surface of the meaning, and then suddenly you enter in what is outside of meaning. There is a cut between meaning and outside of meaning, and this is what it is interesting, because it has what interested Lacan is topology and the knot theory in mathematics. No, it's trying to understand how things are produced, how jouissance, where jouissance is deposited. So the last teaching, Lacan's last teaching, changes his perspective, that the idea that he had at the beginning of his teaching, the idea that the unconscious is not structured like, well, you know, this expression, the unconscious is structured like a language. If you say the unconscious is structured like a language, you imply that there is a chain from one signifier that gives, an arrow that leads you to an S2, another signifier. So this is connecting one signifier to another, you produce meaning. This is the cell of the subject of the meaning is when you point, you connect one signifier with another. This is the idea of the linguistics. But the last Lacan insists that the unconscious is not organized like a chain, but he says that it is more like a swarm. It is not a chain, it is not a set, but this is the expression he uses in Seminar 20, a swarm of bees, like the bees, no? So you have, he puts not as one with, you put open bracket, as one, open bracket, as one, open bracket. So there are, in the unconscious, unconscious is, the definition of Lacan is that let me see, let me look at the definition now. I have it here. He defines the unconscious as a knowledge deposited in la langue, like a trace, like a letter, like an inscription, like a writing of what was the original relation of every one of us with the mother tongue, which means that the structure, there is a differentiation between the difference between the idea of the formation of the unconscious. When we call formation of the unconscious, we say a symptom, a lapsus, a dream, etc. All these formations are made of this chain that unite, that connect one signifier to another. But the last definition of the unconscious as a knowledge, as I have said, definition is as a knowledge.
That definition, Vicente, is on in Seminar 20.
Yes, the definition in Seminar 20 at the end. It says that it is a knowledge deposited in la langue. which means that it is deposited in these letters, these signifiers that are inscribed, that they are alone. They are not connected to other signifiers. Letters that are inscribed as fossils, we could say. Which it is interesting because, like, Freud grasped the idea that first of all, this is an original idea of Freud, that we as speaking beings, when we are in childhood, we listen things before understanding things. So we listen and we capture lots of things, but without understanding. So the signification, the meaning of what we hear, the meaning is separated from what it is inscribed in us as the materiality of the signifier. So at the end, Lacan proposes that the structure, not the formation of the unconscious, but the structure, the real, what we call the real unconscious, not the transferential unconscious, which is the connection with the signifier with another, but the real unconscious is made up of these letters, one by one, separated from, like a swarm, like a signifying swarm, not connected. So like letters that are waiting to be connected. Lacan says, lettres en souffrance. How to say it? Letters suffering because they are alone, looking for not to be connected with other signifiers. Can you follow me? So this SM, the swarm, signifying swarm, is what is the real. So Lacan introduces a practice, his practice, to understand what was this cat in the session when Estella said, "Je rêvais I dreamt of a woman who came to Paris, qui venait à Paris." He made her venir, qui venait, the naître, to be born in Paris. So this is something addressed to this real one, the ones that are in the unconscious, that are not connected as such. So this is my answer to you. First, the idea that we have to understand that when he is talking of the unconscious, and his own practice depends on this, is not the idea that the unconscious is made up of it's not a signifying chain, but a swarm of signifiers, the letters that, like fossils, that are waiting to connect. For instance, a dream is this. A dream, Lacan, Freud says that a dream that is produced, that is a formation of the unconscious, is a connection of one S1 that are latent in the unconscious, waiting to be connected with an S2, something that happened the day before I dreamt, is put in action because there is a connection between these S1s in the unconscious connected with something that happened the day before you had the dream. Don't know whether I responded to the question you put.
Thank you, Vicente. Yes, there is one question in the chat from Marina, and then after Federica, who raised her hand. So Marina, do you want to read it? Marina is from Greece. Marina is from Greece. Isn't the Marina Veneca. Yeah. Do you want me to read it, or you want to read it, Marina? Okay, I can read it, maybe, I don't know. Could you please distinguish between repetition in the articulation of S1, S2, and so, meaning and the repetition the distinguishes so the repetition at the end of the analysis, which includes la langue. What could we say of this? Say it again between the sessions.
Now, can you repeat it, please? Say it again.
Yeah, Marina, can you explain? Because, yeah, I was trying to read, but could you please distinguish between repetition in the articulation of S1, S2,
No, slowly, slowly.
Oh, yes, please.
Marina, okay, can you?
Marina.
What happens with the repetition regarding the meaning when we go from the one session to another, and what happens in the end, including la langue, what happens in the repetition of the one there, and what could we say regarding say it again, this say it again, we say to the patient, this again, this repetition.
Yeah. These points, well, yes, Marina, it's a very important question. It's how to understand what is interpretation. Interpretation is always saying you have not read it. You have not yet read it enough. So you repeat, and the interpretation always say until you get to this repetition, which we had to introduce. Also, we had also to introduce the difference between repetition and iteration, which was introduced by Jacques-Alain Miller in. I have been talking lately in Barcelona about this seminar, this course that Jacques-Alain Miller gave on the being all alone, and the being and the one all alone. So we go from this transferential unconscious, which means the transference, the development, a great deal of the analytical operation consists of going through in the transference, on the story, on the history of the subject, of the chapters of the life of the subject, all the meanings, crossing all the meanings. And once you have crossed all the meanings, the metaphors, the metonymies, all the significations, etc., when you have passed all through this, you enter in this dimension of, as the example I gave you of the occupe-toi d'elle, take care of her, with this signifier which commanded this signifier all alone, that is only grasped at the end of the analytical operation. So there are fixations and there are repetitions. Repetition, it is a concept that belongs to the register of the symbolic. There is a symbolic chain, which there are connection of, there are different ways that the subject always, that different paths that the subject turns around all these, always the same paths. So you can say that, I'll put an example, I'll put another example, Veronica. It is a testimony of one analyst of the school. I can give you a name. It's Alain Berlet. I heard his testimony in Tel Aviv, 20 years ago. He had an analysis, a long analysis, where the main thing was a memory and a ritual. The memory of a mother who was mourning a dead child called Pierre. On one side, there is this memory of the mother grieving for the death of Pierre. On the other side, this in his testimony, this analyst talked about a ritual, could say an obsessional ritual, of not being able to stop how to put it in in French is sopera, soupière, where you serve the soup, and how you call it, la tapa de la sopera.
The lid of the...
The lid of the sopera. How do you say it in English?
It's like a
Sopera.
Pot.
A pot, yeah.
A pot. So
pot.
he had a ritual. He had always, when at the table was the pot with the soup, he had to take the lid off.
Oh, take the lid off.
So there was a ritual. And in one session, the analyst said, "Qui est soupière? Who is under?" Soupière is the pot in French. So it's like a witz, it's like a joke, no? Playing with the equivocity of Pierre, soupière. Who is under the pot?
Yeah, the soupière.
I would say that in this analysis, as an obsessional, he always produced a signifier, this signifier, master signifier, which is death. No? Well, so but this interpretation, of course, this interpretation was very important, but he hyper-identified the subject with this interpretation, with this soupière under Pierre, under Peter. This led him to be hyper-identified, we could say, to this with this interpretation, to an enigmatic enigma. It's like a riddle when you have deciphered. You remember the Edgar Allan Poe's tale? I don't remember now the name. El escarabajo rojo. The beetle. It's also about a beetle. The red beetle. It's in English. It's the enigma. It's a story that there is an enigma and a riddle that has to be deciphered. So, and at the end of the deciphering of the enigma, when you end up finding the deciphering, then you are confronted with an enigma, which is more enigmatic than the
the original enigma.
Exactly. So you could say that this the gold bag, no, not the gold. Yes, the gold bag. Yes, the gold bag. It's I remember, not the red bag, the gold bag. Someone, Carlos Rivas, put it in. Thank you, Carlos.
Gold bag.
I don't know whether you have read this story, but it's very interesting. And this remained as an enigma. Then he went to a second analysis, and there is a second interpretation. In this interpretation, the analyst, because this patient used to produce lots of dreams, and was very, very fascinated with the interpretation of dreams. And the analyst said, "You love your dreams." No. Do you believe in the dreams? Which astonished him. He was astonished with this interpretation. After this, it passed a lot. After a period of time, he recalled a memory of a song. Now we go now to the La Langue. He remembered that when he was a child, with all his friends, children, friends, used to sing a song in French with this wording. La baladière, how to translate it into English, but which we could say, la baladière trempant son cul dans la soupière. So, the dancering would say, putting his bottom in the soupière. that made it's like these songs and rhymes we used to learn when we are children, which doesn't have any meaning. They are meaningless. They are, and we find a lot of jouissance with this repetition of these songs without any meaning. So at the end, all this question of the soupière was related to an enigmatic jouissance of the subject, which was hidden in this. If you go from meaning to the other, and there is a cut from the meaning of. I was answering Veronica. I haven't lost your question, but I want to say that at the end of this,
Marina.
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 At the end is going back to the opacity of the jouissance of the symptom. So going to the real, which is as such, meaningless. And this is what, at the end of this analysis, how did it end it? One day, he went to his session after having bought a sculpture, like a figure, a very expensive one, a Chinese sculpture that reproduced like it's not a pastor here. It's not a pater. It's not a pastor, not a pater like the other one. It was a Chinese sculpture with a monk,
Okay.
with a grave, with a tomb.
Okay.
And he said that this sculpture had costed him lots of money, and he had not said this to his beloved ones. So you could say that this was something contraband, no? Contrabando.
Now
here you out of, well,
not very legal.
He put this he was something hidden from the other, something that was put aside from the knowledge of.
Yeah, smuggling something.
Smuggling, yes, smuggling. That's it. After saying this, the analyst relieved him from the weight of this object and took it from him.
Took the sculpture.
So the separation of the object of this jouissance of the soupière, was the end of the analysis. So there is something that is always a defense. So going back to Veronica's question. So we have on one side repetition, and the repetition was included in this symbolic chain that goes around always infinitely, endless chain, but always leaving aside the jouissance. Always. So the question of the analyst is how to, as in French, you say in French, déranger la défense, molestar la defensa. How to say it in English? Molestar. Molestar is
how to bother.
Pissed off. To pissed off the translation would be something like pissed off.
Exactly. So the act of the analyst was exactly to
pissed off.
How repeat it?
Bothers or pissed
Bothers.
off. Yeah. Bothers the defense.
But yes, but Carlos said it in another word.
Disturb with a D.
Disturb. Disturb. Yeah. Disturb. Yeah, exactly. Disturbing the defense. So introducing this jouissance, this enigmatic jouissance, this the opacity of the jouissance of the symptom of the subject, in question, putting it on the table. That was what was hidden. What was put aside was introduced by means of this disturbing the defense. So the question of defense is fundamental, and introducing what was something that the difference between repetition and iteration is that one, in French you say me connaît, doesn't recognizes. So we do not recognize what we do. And something that was not recognizable was put in the open air, was introduced in the logic of this analysis. I don't know if this explains enough the question of Maria Veneca, but
yes, thank you very much. This was very helpful. So in the end, when regarding iteration, do we put a stop? Do you think so?
I think so. In this case, it was the end. There is no final word. This is the end. So what I mean is that if you go from the perspective of meaning, there is always a flight of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
It is like this tonel, the tunnel. No, tonel is de las Danaides in Spanish. We say this is a mythic Greek myth of the where you put wine or water,
Mm-hmm.
and there is always a hole, no, where
the
water is
Danaid
fleeing, where
The
flees
Danaid
water.
In
The what? The Danaid pot, exactly, pot, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Marina. Thank you. Federica, if you want to ask your question.
Hi, Vicente. Thank you for your conference.
Hi, Federica Chacon.
Yes,
From
yes.
Venezuela.
You come from Venezuela.
Venezuela, un placer.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so I agree with what you said about probably Freud would have taken longer with Stella's dream. Of course, we'll never know.
It's a bad connection.
Oh, sorry. Is it better now?
Yeah. Repeat this, because there was a bad connection.
Yeah.
Okay,
Now,
can you hear me now?
I lost your speech. Yeah.
yeah. Now
Okay.
it's okay.
Now okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I agree with what you said, that probably Freud would have taken longer deciphering Stella's dream. Of course, we'll never know for sure, but we can think so. More so with something you wrote in your text, that meaning is what crystallizes from use. I imagine Stella just like arriving to analysis completely crystallized, and then Lacan just having to go in with a chisel.
Yeah.
But of course, Lacan's cuts were, in the case of Stella, were brutal. Were pretty brutal, and
Yes.
she was exasperated, right?
Yeah.
And this could only be because of the transference that she had, and if not, it wouldn't have been possible to sustain.
Yeah, but I must say something, just to add something. She had previously a long analysis in Argentina, so we couldn't say that the question of telling stories and all the question of the transferential dimension of that, what Lacan introduces here with the cat is not letting, because as you know, do you have the book of Stella because it is already in circulation? Do you have it in?
Have you online read it? Somewhere. I worked online, in it in the seed.
Because she said that exactly. She said what you are trying to well, you are asking me, and it would be nice that she was here to give you the best answer possible. And she told us that in fact this produced. He introduced a cutting of these jouissance, of the phallic jouissance, of going to analysis to just to talk, as he used to do, even smoking in the session and talking with the analyst with a lot of jouissance. So it is a loss of this phallic jouissance and leading her to this jouissance of the one. So introducing her to a way of addressing her to these letters, the one all alone, as we could take it from the last teaching in Lacan, to yes. Reducing all, going towards an unconscious separated from the syntaxis, the grammar, so reduced to a cat. Mm-hmm. Even we could say that the blotting out of all these symbolic and imaginary dimension and leading the subject to the real. So this is, I think, what she tries to explain with this in her testimony.
Yes. Yeah. And in this context, I was wondering about, because all this proposal from Lacan changes a bit how we see transference. So I was wondering, in the case of Stella, or in general, how we can see transference change from this surgery that Lacan introduces.
It's a very good question, and also I should have to talk about this in another perhaps occasion. Let's talk about repetition and transference, because it is very important, the question you put, because from Freud, how to respond, because the idea that the transference is repetition is the idea that the IPA has, since Lacan, since Freud. And what did Freud with transference? He used to frustration, because taking this dimension of repetition that you in analysis, you repeat, you're gonna repeat with the analyst in the transference, something that happened with your father, with your mother, etc. No? So the idea of frustrating these demands of, because speaking implies demanding also. So this wouldn't resolve the question. I remember that Ferenczi changed the question and said that the question is to respond to the repetition by means of gratifying or giving love, for instance, if the subject suffers from not being loved, not having been loved by, so a paternal figure. So, and the question is that Lacan changes from the beginning, even from the discourse of the Rome. He states very clearly that the position of the analyst is playing the role of the dead, so reducing the narcissistic dimension and reducing the subject, the analyst, in the position of the silent, keeping silent, not to interpret. What we know from Freud's experience is that when Freud found the sexual trauma, when he could interpret the sexual jouissance, he stopped. He was glad to find this sexual dimension. Lacan thinks that there is something beyond this. The real is beyond the sexual signification. And this is something that I am not going to talk about now. I would need another occasion to talk about this, about repetition and transference. But your question is very, very important. And if you're going to prepare the Congress of the NLS, it is very important to look back to what Freud did and the different interpretations of what Freud did by the post-Freudians, or even the contemporaries of Freud from Abraham and Ferenczi, etc., and going forward until Lacan, when Lacan takes another position regarding the question of transference. He doesn't see transference as mere repetition. This is an important question. Transference is not only repetition. There is a dimension of repetition. Transference is the enactment of the la mise en acte of the real of the sexual reality of the unconscious. So the enactment of the yes, he says it in seminar 11 of the real the sexual reality of the unconscious. That's it, what he says in seminar 11. He changes the perspective. It's not a mere repetition. It's something that what is to put in action to the enactment of the reality of the sexual reality of the unconscious. It is taking into account that what is at stake in the analytical operation is the drive. And the drive, when you are speaking, the drive is always working in silence. So this is something new, how to address the analytical operation, to not to lose the perspective of the drive at stake in every session. What does it mean? It means that when you talk, when you are talking, and in fact you are always at the same time enacting the drive. You go to the analyst to make yourself be seen. For instance, to putting the gaze into place, or the voice to make yourself be heard, or even to make yourself be, I don't know whether you say it in English, to be shitted, or to be devoured, if you take the oral dimension, the anal dimension, and we add also these two objects, like Lacan introduces, the gaze and the voice. So these objects are at stake when you are saying. So there is the saying and the fact when you say something, there is something operating of the drive. So this would lead us to introduce the question of repetition and the drive, not the question of transference and the drive, not only the transference of repetition of signifiers, of a repetition of symbolic chain. No?
We have another question, Lucila. Yeah, we have a few minutes, so yeah.
It's
all, yeah. So if you can ask very fast.
It's just a comment. Yes, just to thank Vicente. It was really amazing. An amazing conference. The topic is fantastic. And as I was listening to you, in terms of this reading exercise, I was thinking in the difficulty, which is a language, in this case, hearing you in English. And something occurred in terms of the reading in a different language and the hearing. I think it was amazing. For me, it was especially amazing because the vocabulary being different than the one that you are traditionally listening in Spanish, something shifted. I don't know very well how to, but the reading exercise, I could say it was different as an experience. I think it was amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicente. Well, it was really amazing.
Well, nice to meet you.
Yeah. So well, we'll take your word and we'll invite you to for another time to give repetition and transference. So thank you. We have the pressure.
Why not? But when are you going to have this Congress in this May or June?
It's July. So,
July.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk to see if it's possible. Okay, maybe at the beginning of July or something. But
Now Alan Rowan has just arrived. Alan Rowan, my friend Alan.
Yeah.
Vicente, I've been here all along.
Yeah, he was here
all alone.
Yeah. All alone.
So I listened
Natalie,
to your talk.
Where is Natalie?
Elsewhere.
Where are you now?
I'm in Berlin.
In Berlin also. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So.
But have you been following this conference?
Yes, and if we had more time, I would love to make some comments, but I realize it's 8 p.m. already, so.
Yeah, but we can have 5 minutes if you want to give a little comment. Yeah.
Well, I could say something and maybe just leave it in the air, because if I've understood you well, Vicente, I would put it like this: there's something outside meaning, a signifying effect, the result of la langue that impacts the subject. That in a way, what we could say here, and it's a kind of question, that fixates a form of satisfaction or jouissance in the subject at that point. So my question really is, could we say, for example, in Freudian terms, that we're talking about effects on or of the drive when we talk of S1? That we're really talking about the drive, body event, something that then is interpreted through the fantasy, but in fact is there before the fantasy. And I find this whole thing very interesting to think about, because of course, once we mention the drives, and if we think of Freud, we think of Lacan's idea of a swarm of S1s, well, do we have to think of, let's say, the oral drive, the anal drive, the gaze, the voice, the phallus, which of course, for some subjects, I think, you get a predominant organization of the drive, one that really dominates. And yet for other subjects, you have this swarm effect. Many marks made in the body that, let's say, are isolated S1s or drive effects. Anyway, I've said too much. I think it's my own question.
No, but I think it's very important. No, but you introduce these concepts that come from Freud, and that Lacan rereads them with this category, which we use symbolic, imaginary, and real. And so if we take these categories, we can say that the drive, for instance, the drive as a circuit is already in the symbolic, because it's a grammar. There is a grammar of, it's already organized by the symbolic. And puts into action this fantasy, which is I mentioned also what I mentioned related to the imaginary. You know, on the other side, and on the contrary, I think that this one all alone, this S1, this related to this event, the event, you know, the body event, is something which is it's outside the repetition of the drive of the symbolic, which is something outside this, which is captured, but it's always when you enter the room. It's like if you go to Pompeii, Naples, you go to the, imagine that, no, there's a film by Fellini. You remember this film by Fellini called Roma?
Yes.
Rome. There is one moment when they find some under the ground. You know that they couldn't make the underground because it's plenty of archaeological sites. There's a moment when Fellini introduces us to a cave with the light. You see the engineers and introducing themselves with the lights, and they see these frescoes on the walls, and as the oxygen of the air has come into this room, and then they fade all these images, all these beautiful pictures, paintings and disappear because of the object. This object, little a, is something like this. It is you have all these apparatus, the symbolic apparatus of the drive, but the S1 of the one all along is something that you cannot take it back, as this example that Alain Merlet gives us of the song, lost song of La Baladière trempant son pull dans la boule. It's lost, no? And disappears at the moment when you go into the cave found in Rome. Then all this disappears. So something that has to do with our experience. So that's why Lacan says that the space of the lapse is the unconscious. Is when you enter, you lose immediately this trace. This trace is something related to what the object that was before. So you cannot grasp the object, but you only have the trace, the mark of the event. I don't know whether if I have complicated more your question, but it's separating the symbolic of the drive, the imaginary of the putting into action of the imaginary of the fantasy, and the all alone, the one all alone, which is something related with this moment where there is only the cat, there is only the mark, but the object is lost when you enter the.
Yes. Thank you so much,
yeah.
Vicente, for taking the extra time to comment on my question.
Yeah. Thank you, Vicente, so much. And thank you, everyone, for coming and participating, for your questions. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. That's amazing. Very good. Thank you so much. Amazing, Vicente.
Bye. See you.
See you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias.
No.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.
Chao.
Bye.